This is a 3D parallax window. There's no CGI here, no optical illusions, no post-production. This is real life, the product of a few weeks worth of labor and so many failed attempts. Today, I'm going to show you how I built a portal to another dimension in the comfort of my own bedroom, how I stole technology way back from 2013 to do it, and the nightmare of workarounds required to make it work. The inspiration came from a YouTuber who goes by Johnny Lee. 18 years ago, he demonstrated this exact same concept using a Wii remote. For 2007, it was honestly like witchcraft. But here's the problem. That was nearly 2 decades ago. And in internet years, that is like ancient history, before even the time of those troll faces and clickbait Minecraft videos. I wanted to recreate this using modern tech, but there's surprisingly little documentation on how to actually do it today. No easy guides, just the odd showcase video or two. So, I decided that I had enough knowledge to rival the top engineers at ILM who developed the volume. Despite not having a PhD in human-computer interaction, or any degree for that matter, I'm just a guy who likes Blender and cool tech. So, how hard could it be? It was quite hard. So, let's break down the logic. In the mind space, it is very simple, just 3 steps. Number 1. The eye. We need some sort of sensor or something to track my head in physical space. Number 2. The bridge. We need to grab those XYZ coordinates from the sensor and push them to the window, which is number 3. Unity, which takes those XYZ coordinates and renders the game world from my head position. Simple, right? But before I show you the solution, let me show you what I went through to actually get this thing to life. Let's first start off with that method to track my head in 3D, and how the solution that I ended up with wasn't the only one. Attempt number 1, stereoscopy. This is basically how your eyes work. With a single camera, we can get a really accurate X and Y of any point, but the Z axis is where a single camera just doesn't cut it. But if you have 2 cameras spaced a little apart, and knowing the exact distance and rotation relative to each other, you can triangulate literally any point in 3D space. This is just basic trigonometry / geometry. So this 2-camera system relies on pixel disparity. The farther away I am, the closer my head appears in the 2 images. So both cameras see your face, and by comparing the horizontal difference between where your nose appears on camera A and on camera B, we can calculate the depth. I first tried this with just 2 standard webcams, but they had way too much latency, and the frame rate was okay. Then I was looking into the PS3i, a classic piece of technology capable of almost 187 Hz with much less latency. Problem is, to get that frame rate, you're gonna have to drop the resolution significantly. So I simulated this resolution with the webcams I already had. Hold up, wait a minute. I was going back to make some B-roll footage, and I went out to record the very low resolution one again, and today it tracked literally perfectly. I don't know why, but maybe the lighting was bad the day I tried it out, or something like that. But if you can achieve that high refresh rate with the PS3i, go for stereoscopy as the method, cause the jitter was really the only thing holding me back from not using stereoscopy. Anyways, back to the video. I considered using 2 phones that could sit on top of my monitor, but my brother and I didn't want to lose our phone privileges anytime I wanted to use this. So unfortunately, stereoscopy was a bust. This led me to punch a little bit higher. The Valve base station used in VR. If I had a real job, this might actually be what I use for that tracking. But the tech here is genuinely brilliant. Basically like a reverse stereoscopy. So the base station, or the lighthouse, is actually a very dumb box. It doesn't actually see anything, it just spins a motor. It emits a brief IR pulse and just sweeps a laser line across the room at usually 100 RPS. The tracker is covered in many little sensors called photodiodes. When calibrating, the software starts an internal clock in sync with the rotor's RPM. So when the rotor's angle is at exactly 0, the software starts a stopwatch. When the laser sweep hits the sensor, the watch stops. Based on exactly how many milliseconds have passed, the computer calculates the precise angle, and it gets crazier. We now have the X position relative to the camera, but what about the Y? So the laser itself is actually in the shape of a V. So the tracker gets hit by the first diagonal, and a split second later it gets hit by the second diagonal. Because of the V-shape, the time gap between the two hits tells us exactly how high up the sensor is. It is pure, beautiful engineering and geometry. No AI, no image processing, just insanely fast equipment and blazing fast math. So once we get the coordinates of each photodiode, we can kind of compare the locations to each other. Since each tracker is made the exact same, the computer knows the distances between the sensors. And based on a few calculations based on how big they look combined and what their XY distances would be at certain angles, we can find the distance from the tracker to the lighthouse. And then the program offsets that to get some real-world coordinates. It's sub-millimeter accurate, has zero latency, and it's perceptually perfect. And it is $900. I don't have those funds to drop $900 on a week-long project, so let's move on. So I went back to the source. Johnny Lee used a Wii remote, and I'm using its spiritual successor, the Xbox One Kinect. This thing is an industrial computer vision sensor designed as an unfortunately failed gaming product. I mean, what kind of gamer actually wants to do physical education when playing your games? Anyways, the Kinect V2 has a bunch of sensors, one of them being indirect time of flight. Unlike a regular camera that just sees light, the Kinect blasts the room with modulated IR pulses. It has a sensor that opens and closes buckets for photons to collect at incredible speeds, like nanoseconds. It measures the ratio of photons that collect in bucket A, the early arrivals, and bucket B, the late arrivals, independent of the total number of photons. By comparing that ratio, it knows exactly how long the light took to bounce to my face and then return. It doesn't care about texture, and it doesn't care if the lights are off, unless the surface is extremely reflective or there's a lot of ambient IR light. It just sees pure depth. These are a very basic overview of how these three systems work, but I highly suggest you look into them. Even if you're not going to be using these in any major project, it's just so cool to see how these things are engineered and how they work. So then I wrote a C++ script to pull that sensor's information and use it. I'd say it's about 100 lines of code. It first initializes the Kinect and then grabs the head bone using the Kinect SDK's built-in armature tracking function, and then sends the camera space coordinates over UDP. But what is UDP, and why would we want to use that? Well, UDP is a protocol to send data through programs on your PC with perceptually no lag. TCP, the normal protocol, does a handshake to make sure that the data arrived safely. UDP instead just screams data into the void. It's basically like spray and pray over fire and confirm. For real-time tracking, we don't really care if we miss a packet, we just need the newest head location. So now that we have my coordinates of my head in real time, we need to do something with it. I could have gone crazy trying to make a custom OpenGL application, like how I think Johnny Lee and maybe this guy did, but why reinvent the wheel when we have Unity? So I made a new project with HDRP and started coding. So just to gloss over this code quickly, I hooked up the UDP server to this script and wrote it to a public variable so we could use those coordinates anywhere. Then this script sets to the camera to always follow the head's position and rotates it to face the window, aka the origin, every frame. After all that was done, I was excited to see the code because it was basically finished. So I pressed play and looked terrible. It all looked off. It didn't look like a window at all. If I looked left, the camera rotated right to keep the center in view. But that's not even how a window works. If you look at a window through the side, the window doesn't just rotate. The shape of the window itself shrinks, and you see much less, not the exact same amount. So I looked into references, people online, real-world stuff, and I realized three things. The corners of the window always stay in place. You can never see behind the window. And as you move to the side more, you see less. I know, shocking information. Boy finds out how window works. But this helped me find the proper method for calculating the perspective, off-axis projection. In 3D graphics, the camera view is a pyramid called the frustum. The camera is always in the center, but for this, we gotta break that rule. As you can see, when we are rotating, the edges slide and the view goes behind the window. But the projection matrix version is kind of like a hood. The window stays in one place, and the angle that you look at it changes. Unity actually has a built-in function for this. We just tell it where the points will be in camera space, minus our head position so the camera can move, and the edges stay locked in place. Once I swapped rotation for shearing, boom, magic. It felt like the monitor actually contained volume. This is a huge W, and technically we're done, but I'm a Blender artist. I can't just have a gray box. We need to make it look fantastic. So I opened up Blender and threw in a photo scanned mountain, and then found a nice tree model online that I scattered around using the hair particle system. You can do this by changing the render option to object, and then selecting the tree, and making sure the origin is at the trunk. Once I was happy with the density, I felt like something was wrong. Like Blender was trying to tell me something, but nah, I don't care. I applied the particle system so we could export to Unity, and oh no. Oh wait a minute, what's going on? Oh! 114 million polygons. My PC was sounding like a jet engine panning around the scene. So this is where we gotta get dirty with optimization. So the problem wasn't the mountain, it was the trees. So I first undid the scattering and focused on optimizing the original tree model. I temporarily separated the tree by material, so I could treat the leaves and the base as separate objects. Then I selected a random number of faces from the leaves object and deleted them. Since each leaf was one face, I effectively just reduced the number of leaves. Up until about 70% deleted, you could not see a difference. I also forced the trunk to be a low poly profile with only 3 loop cuts. Same with all the branches. Then, the oldest trick in the book, build boards. For all the distant trees, I just replaced the models with flat faces with 2D PNGs. Finally, I also limited the scattering to only what we would see. So anything that was really far away or behind the mountain was just gone. I did this by creating a new vertex group, painting the density in the weight paint tab, and assigning it to the density in the hair particle settings. So we went all the way from 114 million polys all the way down to only 2 million. Still quite high, but manageable. With the optimized scene, I imported to Unity and scaled it. Hit play and it worked. Technically. Honestly, it was boring. Here's the catch with Parallax. It relies on layers moving at different speeds to make it look realistic. The mountain was so big and far away that when I moved my head, it barely shifted. It didn't look like a 3D window, it just looked like a 2D image just sliding around. And I didn't spend this many weeks just for it to look kinda cool. I wanted magic. So I realized that to sell the illusion, I needed volume. I needed a box. Taking some inspiration from the Bat Cave in The Dark Knight, I built a simple concrete room with some inset lights. So I threw in some random models in there, dancing Fortnite characters, cars, robots, just to see how the depth works. And immediately the effect popped. Since you can see the floor and the walls and the ceiling just extending into the screen, I think my brain accepts it more as a real thing. So I thought, why stop here? I tried a Minecraft scene, like those old Minecraft wallpapers you'd find in every 13-year-old's computer. So I found a really nice looking spot in a new world and dug a hole into the wall exactly 16 wide by 9 tall. By matching the aspect ratio of the digital hole to my real monitor, it should literally look like I smashed a hole in my screen to look into the game. I then used Mineways to export the chunks and clean them up in Blender, so it only had as many polys as it needed. So then back in Unity, I imported the model, pressed play, and it looks sick. Being a big Minecraft player in the late 2010s, this is honestly like a dream come true. Finally, I wanted a wizard window looking out at a castle. So I got a few references and modeled up a gothic looking medieval window. On that desk, I found as many wizard looking assets I could find online, then I placed them there. Then, outside, I placed another snowy mountain and a 3D scan castle on top of it. I needed snow on the rooftops, but I didn't want to retexture the entire model manually. So, a quick shader tip. You can mix your base texture with white and use the geometry's normal vector as the mask. By separating XYZ and only using the Z, up, channel, the shader automatically paints white only on the surfaces facing the sky. Instant accumulated snow. I imported it into Unity and this time it turned out awesome. I also figured out how to get refractive materials, so I'm pretty proud of those 2 glasses that are on the table. I could honestly go on about the other things I made. I made like almost 10 of them. I guess I just really got into it. So we got head tracking at 30 FPS, accurate off-axis perspective, and a portal to Minecraft on my desk. But the big question is, why bother? VR technology has existed for like years now. It is perceptually perfect, as most people would say. Tracks your head with like sub-millimeter precision, and since it has 2 screens, one for each eye, you get like actual stereo 3D depth. If I close one eye, then the magic window looks perfect, but with both eyes open, my brain kind of fights the illusion a bit. It knows the screen is flat even if the perspective is shifting around. VR basically solves all that. However, VR is heavy, it's isolating. It requires a strap on your face and a cable tethering you to the matrix. To me, there's a specific beauty to this. It's the naked eye experience. There's no friction. I don't have to gear up to use it. I could like walk past my computer. I could see another world just extending deep into my desk. I think it tricks your brain just enough to feel magical, but it exists in like the real world as a piece of furniture rather than just a simulation. I know that Johnny Lee video was made when I was like a year old, but it still feels nostalgic to me. I looked at a bunch of his older videos about like tracking objects or placing screens on things that they're not meant to be on, and at a time when this technology was still so young as well. It feels like a guy just trying to make cool things out of underdeveloped technology. Even if at the time it may have not been very practical, it didn't matter. So does it really even matter now if VR technology is better? I say just take it for what it is. A really cool window to another dimension. If you want to try out this project or see how it works, I put everything on my GitHub. The C++ script, Unity, optimized trees, everything. I would love to see someone take this even further. Maybe someone with like a base station tracking system could show us what it looks like. I usually do Blender art stuff on this channel, but I really enjoyed this deep dive into hardware hacking. If y'all dig this style, let me know in the comments and like the video. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.